Hello, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first session of a day in this room. This session is about mitigation measures and its effectivity. My name is Martin Strnad. I work for Nature Conservation Agency of the Czech Republic, and my topic is large carnivores and connectivity of habitats. And I also work with the project which evaluates effectivity of ecoducts in the Czech Republic. So let me introduce the first speaker, which is Nikki Voumvoulaki from Egnatia Motorway from Greece. From this, she will speak this presentation.
Do I need the microphone?
Please speak to the microphone in order to participants online hear us.
Yes. Okay. So I work for Egnatia Motorway. It's a state company in Greece, a motorway company. And I will speak about the technical interventions that we took to improve the permeability of Egnatia Motorway in northern Greece, the Western Macedonia, northern Greece. It's a program that we participated with other partners from Spain, from Italy, from Romania. And this presentation is made by the Greek partners, which are Callisto NGO, the NGO Callisto, and Cosmote Telecommunications. So a few words about the road itself. It's the red line that you see over there in northern Greece. It's the Egnatia Motorway. This area here, this and also this over there in the mountains, were the areas where you could see the bear population in northern Greece. So while designing and constructing the Egnatia Motorway, we had to compensate with this area with measures taken, and the measures that we took were already in the design phase of the project. And we had a green bridge and many structures that were big enough. One of them was even 10 meters by 5, 10 meters by 5. So a big openness index. But I will not speak about this one because in the meantime, according to the action plan for the brown bear in 2021, we could see that the bear population has extended to many more areas than the previous ones. That is in the mainland of Greece, central Greece. Also here you could see the places where the bear population still exists. So we started to have problems in this area, which was the vertical axis of the Egnatia Motorway, during that was already in operation. So we had to cope with bear fatalities in that area. We had 18 bear fatalities from 2009 to 2014. So in 2014, we constructed a bear-proof fence that you can see here. It's of a height of 3 meters. With the most important part is the horizontal mesh that you can see here, so that the bears cannot dig and get inside the motorway. That happened in 2014. That is in between the big economic crisis that we had. We managed to get the money and build this fence for about 50 kilometers both ways. But then we created more fragmentation problems, you can imagine. And we had to cope with that too. So we participated in the LIFE project. It is called Life Safe Crossing. And what we did at first was to create an identity of each passage passage, we mean we had 149 structures all along the 50 kilometers long vertical axis. So all of them were evaluated, but we had to select some of them to make improvements, and those were 56 structures along the vertical axis. For those 56 structures, we made an identity of each one. So in that identity, we put all the data that were already collected from camera tracks, and the environment that was around each structure, and also finally all the proposals that we had to, all the interventions that were proposed for each structure. So you see, like, for example, number one could be to clean the debris, or to plant to create another environment for the entrance of the structure. In those final 56 structures, 47 of them were culverts, so the big majority were culverts, and of those, 33 of those were already monitored by cameras. This is the distribution of the openness index in all those structures of the vertical axis. If we say that the openness index for large mammals should be 1.49, 1.5, let's say, we saw that all the structures we had along the motorway had much less openness index. That is less than 0.7, and the big majority were 0.1. Imagine comparing to the 1.49 and even the 0.05. So we had to deal with these openness indexes. The methodology. We put cameras, Callisto, NGO, the NGO Callisto, and Cosmotet and Communications, put the cameras along in those structures, 47 structures, and a prototype was created by Cosmotet. So almost more than 100,000 videos and photos were processed and collected and processed, and they created that prototype that automatically each of the species that passed the structures was automatically placed in one in an online database. So we automatically knew that we had so many bears, so many other species in each structure. That was a lot of work that we saved manually. The selection criteria for all the improvements that we made. First was the location of the structures. So it depended on what availability we had with the telemetry data, the availability of roadkills in this area, and the proximity of human activities. Another criteria was the use of structures. So if a structure was used a lot, we didn't do any intervention. And to tell you the truth, the openness index didn't matter because the openness index was already too low. So we selected structures that we saw that were critical for connectivity, let's say. And in that case, a big openness index was not used by bears. You see this one trying to come in, but then she went out because she didn't feel safe, probably. And the categories of improvement that we selected were 8, including the construction of ramps, dry ledges, fencing. We'll see later. So fencing improvements. We had already put the fence that I talked about, but in some cases it was wrong. The placement of the fence was wrong. So we changed it in areas like this, and we put it this way. And as I was talking with Marcus yesterday about the species that are coming into the motorway through the interchanges. So in this case, if an interchange is close by and you have an animal coming in, then in this case, you have the animal has the possibility to go outside. So it's a big, it's a quite interesting case close to interchanges, I would say. Another intervention was construction of light screens. Due to low budget, the light screen that we used was this one. The material was not a permanent, let's say, thing, but we wanted to see how the animals would react with this shade of the lights of the cars. We'll see later. Pruning was another intervention, cutting trees that blocked the entrances, planting and irrigation system, many of those structures, and the criteria to select the plant species, which were Cotinus and Spartan, were mainly to be native species, not to be very high so that we needed maintenance, and also species that wouldn't attract birds, so we wouldn't have accidents on the road with birds. Addition of natural materials was used to attract smaller animals towards the structures, like this. Construction of dry ledges. We created these structures to help animals in case of high water level across the structures. Other cases. The most important one is in this case where we had a big ovens index, it's a bridge, but although here it's a big place for animals to cross, in this case where the water comes just here, the animals cannot cross from this section to the other section. We had cases that they were trying to pass over the fence on the motorway. So this is what we did, and this is the result. So we created this ledge for the animals to cross from this side. The removal of debris, that was a big effort, because there were many structures underneath the roads that are parallel to the motorway, and the structures were communicating, but those structures were very old, and they were completely blocked. In some cases, we had to make a new tunnel, let's say, for 30 meters to unblock from the depth. That was a big job. The construction of ramps in several structures, that was also a big job, because it helped a lot. In cases like this, where the animals cannot pass, we created these ramps and staircases, and we saw many animals crossing. Okay, other cases. Now the results, we saw that after, with the second monitoring period, after the purchase, there was more than double of animals, number of animals crossing the structures, and also this is for bears, because for other animals we didn't have the same results, and also this for bears, that were 29 structures used in comparison to 22 structures used before the program. This is the frequency of the bears during the day and night spectrum. So of course in the night, late in the night and early in the morning. The conclusions. We saw that having interventions in small open index structures was very effective. And the most effective result was that we created passages and structures that could be used by animals from fragmented structures. And that is a very effective result. Also, another one, as expected, the ungulates didn't use these underpass a lot with a small openness index. So we could see that in this area, road deer to be used as an indicator species to evaluate the road permeability. And furthermore, monitoring and other management maintenance is necessary for keep the structures used by them. We use this experience as a company. We use this experience in other cases where we also did the identification of the structures. Now we need some money to build the fence, mainly for 7 million euros, and the other interventions along the road. Also, as a stakeholder, we created the database for incidents involved on the motorway, and we create the heat maps with areas that are hotspots for accidents with animals, so we could intervene with those hotspots. And as an experience, we could say that multidisciplinary operation is needed. Guidelines for designers that will be used also, the guidelines together with the contract of the designer of the motorway, that will be very important. And also training courses for technical staff. We see that it's important for the people that work on site to know how to do their job better, because small details make a difference. Maintenance, of course, we all know that it's very important. And if I can do this, just to show you, this is the before state, where the structure was difficult to be used for crossing by animal. You see here, they're trying to cross. And here, 2 videos showing bears very easily crossing without kind of intervention with their arm. Or they easily use the structure now to go to the other side. So very easily, they were easily adjusted, and run. And all the participants and all my colleagues that we work together, and mainly this person that showed us his back, that's right here, that proposed all the critical interventions, Lazarus.
Thank you, Nikki, very much for your presentation. You did a lot for the mitigation of Egnatia Highway. There is a space for one question, if you want. Please.
Thank you very much. My name is Hans Huijser. I'm from the Netherlands. Question about the governance. Who within the state is responsible for making this happen? And my second question in relation to that is, how does it work with permits to make this happen? Or do you need permits?
The first question, please.
Who's responsible within the state to make this happen?
We are a state company, Egnatia. My company, the motorway company, is a state company. So it's like the state did this, but for the operation, you mean?
But also to improve the state for the bears, to make this happen for the bears.
We were responsible. We are responsible for designing, construction, and operation of the, yes. And then any permits? No, because we are responsible for the whole region. Our motorway, we're responsible for whatever is inside our the zone of the motorway. So we didn't need any permits. We just needed the permits from the municipalities and the region of Western Macedonia to leave us make all the interventions in the structures that were aside on the parallel roads.
Is it difficult to get them?
No. It was okay.
Easy job.
No problem with that. We unblocked all these structures, so for them it was a good a job that they should have done before.
Thank you. Also, another question, but we have no time for only very quick question.
I have a short question about the construction that you showed, where you had this bridge and you made sort of a wall on the side for the animals. I come from Sweden. Sorry, my name is Eva Dickerson, and I work with the Swedish Transport Administration. Normally, when we make passages that go under the bridges for smaller mammals, we have these shelves on the bridges. Were there any discussions concerning the constructions that you did on a sort of a technical level? What will it mean to the stream pattern of the water? Will it sort of affect the bridge construction? Any discussions about that?
In general, you could say that that could be done, but if during the design of the bridges and of the whole motorway, there should be this the designers, if they had I talked about all the guidelines should be given to designers. So the designers of the motorway should have let's say a direction how to build the bridges in order not to have these problems later. So in that case, we didn't, so we had to intervene at a later stage.
And there were no problems, I suppose. Because
No,
you make
no,
good things to use. Good example. Thank you very much.
thank you.
Thank you very much for your discussion. And now, please invite me, Mr. Dr. Rodney van der Ree from the WSP Australia, and we are curious of his global assessment of mitigation measures or barrier effect.
So this is technology at work right here. Okay. Yep. Sure. You want to get my slides up? That's the wrong result. Yeah, I'm not sneaky. Yes. So thank you. It's great to be here again, chatting to you about, I guess, the extent of our knowledge about how effective wildlife crossing structures are. And so this was work that I did with some other people who they actually did most of the work. And so certainly Kylie and Trina did most of the work on this. And so just acknowledging their inputs into this project, but they couldn't be here. So wildlife crossing structures, I guess we all know what they are: underpasses, overpasses, and their main purpose is to maintain or restore safe crossings by wildlife. I know certainly in Australia, lots of road agencies think that crossing structures are also there to stop mortality, wildlife vehicle collision. Yes, they help, but fencing is the primary reason fencing is the primary mechanism to stop wildlife vehicle collisions, and the crossing structures are about connectivity. And we've built thousands of these now around the world. I've done a very careful calculation of that, and also a very careful calculation of how many photos and evidence of animals using crossing structures, and we can demonstrate use by a whole range of species. I want to touch on the difference between use of a crossing structure and effectiveness. And we need to ask, like, use is just, are animals using them and how often do they use it? So yes, we can confirm that in Nikki's previous example, the bears were using the crossing structures. So that's use. She also measured the rate of use. I forget what it was, but it's how many times did bears use that crossing over time. And she also measured to some degree, the effectiveness. So she looked at the number of bear crossings before some of those shelves and things were installed, or ledges, and then again afterwards. So that's getting towards the effectiveness. And that's pretty rare. I've got to say, there's not many studies that have actually demonstrated some of that, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So for the last 10 or 20 years, we've been promoting these sort of SMART goals. So by a SMART goal, I mean it's specific, it's measurable, it's achievable, it's realistic in its time frame. That is, when we're building a road or a railway, we want to have X number of crossings by these particular species to happen within 5 years or within 10 years, whatever it might be. So that rather than the sort of vague goal, let's enhance crossings or let's restore crossings, it's actually trying to put numbers and timeframes on those goals. We've also been talking ad nauseum, I think, about how we do these studies. So we've been recommending, if you're going to do a study, if you can get data before and after, and you do it at control sites and impact sites. And if you can replicate that, that would be fantastic too. And look, I understand, because I've done plenty of studies of monitoring programs that are not replicated, they're not backy, and they're not control impact. So I'm not, just want to be really clear, I'm not having a go at anyone or being negative. I'm very conscious about the limitations that we work under. But also experiments. So rather than just monitoring things that road companies are going to build, actually engaging with the road company up front and saying, okay, we're uncertain about how well this might work. So let's build 5 crossing structures that are this big and 5 that are this big and 5 that are this big. And let's measure whether there's any preference for those dimensions. Or maybe it's got to do with, you can add in the variable of interest that you might be considering better than I can. But let's do some experiments and trying to do the best possible studies that we can do. So in our project, we know that there's a wide range of species using a wide diversity of crossing structures. And surely any use of a crossing structure is better than none at all. So on one side, you could just say, well, there's animals using it, isn't that enough? I'm not sure that's true. We were asking, what is the evidence in the published literature that wildlife crossing structures actually mitigate the barrier effect of roads on movement? So not how many studies let animals cross or showed that animals were crossing, and how many could demonstrate some evaluation of their effectiveness. And the specific questions we asked were, do wildlife crossing structures prevent an expected decline in cross-road movement after the road was built? Do crossing structures restore movement to pre-construction conditions? So if you're building a new road, does the crossing structures restore the rate of movement that was happening before the road was built? And does the crossing structure improve movement relative to taking no action at all? So quite specific questions. So we did a systematic literature search of various academic databases to find the published papers. We did what we called a purposive search, which is basically let's just ask as many people as we can, and based on our existing databases and what we knew was out there. We searched the grey literature. We looked at the non-English language publications. We looked at theses, conference proceedings, websites, international experts, and so on. We wanted to make sure we could get everything that was possibly out there. We only used full text documents. So if it was a one-page brochure, that wasn't good enough. And the full text document had to be in response to a mitigation measure, so a crossing structure. And it had to use things like tracks, photos, radio tracking or GPS tracking, mark recapture, or individual-based genetic approaches. So we had to be able to measure a response to the crossing structure. Any studies that said the same thing, because that happens a bit, we screened out those documents. And the questions that we asked, so to keep it fair, we made sure that the questions we asked of each paper were based on what the paper could actually tell us. And I'll get to that in a minute, because the study design actually influences what we can infer or what we can learn about that particular study. And we also found a couple of biases that really, really threw us and made us think hard about how we do the evaluation. And we used a qualitative and quantitative approach to make that assessment. So the steps to classify the evaluation type and then what can the study tell us. So I'll just take you through this to kind of give you the background. So if there was a benchmark, that was the first, or if there was a benchmark or not, that was the first kind of criteria. So a benchmark might be a control site or a before and after. If there was no benchmark, that basically meant we went in afterwards, counted animals using the structure, and that was it. So if there was a benchmark, was the benchmark no road, so an area without any roads whatsoever, or was it an unmitigated road? So what was the control in that case? If it was a no road or a no road upgrade, that then the next options was when the mitigation occurred. So it happened at the same time as construction, or actually I think that's a point here. Is that a pointer? Yep. It happened at the same time as construction, or it was a retrofit to an existing road. So in the previous talk, Nikki talked about this one, at least, the retrofit of those shelves to an existing structure. And then this is what we could learn from each of these different options. So if it went across the top and it was simultaneous with construction, we could say that that particular mitigation prevented a decline in movement. Did it restore movement? If it was an unmitigated road, could it improve movement? Or if there was no benchmark at all, is there evidence to show that that the mitigation measure, the crossing structure, allowed movement? And then these were the answers that we came up with, the outcomes. No net loss, some loss, no movement. Fully restored, partly, or no movement. Improved, not improved, no movement. Movement allowed, or no movement at all. So those biases I talked about, the first one is, and this makes sense. If we were building crossing structures in areas which were not the most important for the animals, we're not doing our jobs properly. But that makes it difficult when you're trying to evaluate, or when you've got a comparison, a location on the same highway with a mitigation and a site without a mitigation, because a site without the mitigation is naturally, hopefully, from a road construction perspective, going to have fewer crossings and fewer movements than the location with the crossing structure, because we would build the crossing structure here where these black arrows represent lots of movement. That's the obvious spot to build something, so we do. But we're comparing this location that's got lots of animal crossings to this location here with few crossings. And yeah, just the difference between a backy design or a control impact design. So that's the first bias that we had to take into account. The second one, when we're comparing rates of crossing and a crossing structure and there is a fence involved, all of a sudden the crossing structure is no longer 5 meters wide, but effectively the crossing structure is as wide as the fencing is long. So let's say it's an upgraded highway, or we're retrofitting these things to an existing highway. We measure the rate of crossing before we build the crossing structure. And so we get this kind of movement, and it's encompassing an area. This blue line is the width of the crossing structure. We get this rate of movement at the control and the impact. But then afterwards, we build a fence and we're effectively sampling a much larger area. And so, of course, we would expect to see more animals crossing at that location, assuming the crossing structure worked, because the animals are coming from further. Before we built the fence, they were crossing everywhere. So in a sense, we're kind of artificially raising the rate of crossing of a crossing structure by building a fence. And that's a good outcome from a conservation perspective, because we want as many animals as possible to use it. But it does complicate the analysis. How many for time? 3 minutes. Okay, moving along. I shouldn't have asked, should I? So we found just 2,700 studies. We whittled it down to 313 that we could get some data out of. And these were the numbers that showed how many actually prevented a decline in movement, restored movement, or improved movement. And basically, there were 35 studies that could show a change in wildlife crossing, wildlife movement. Out of that 313 studies, there was only 35 odd that could demonstrate a quantitative change in the rate of crossing. Quick overview of the types of study design. So most of them, almost 250, were after only. So they only did investigations after the crossing structure was installed, and a small number doing control impact before or after, or a backy design. The majority of our studies focused on mammals. The majority, well, this is a little bit interesting, I guess, and promising. Most studies had 2 to 5 crossing structures, and a few of them had more than 10. So that's good. So we've actually got good replication in many of our studies. This is a little bit concerning. I think the majority of studies just occurred for 2 years. So depending on when the tracking or the monitoring commenced, if that was the day after construction finished, of course, it takes time for the crossing structures to become useful. The vegetation needs to grow. Got it. I'll send you to the paper to have a look at this one, but basically there's a whole range of different groups of species, the numbers of studies that were involved, and the number of studies that showed increases in movement or that could actually measure the change in movement. I'll move on, I think, just given the time. So the state of the knowledge, 6% of studies could demonstrate that there was a prevention in the movement, that we could prevent a decline of movement. Less than 1% of studies could demonstrate that we had a restoration of movement. Almost 8% demonstrated an improvement in movement, and 86% of studies could demonstrate that we had allowed movement to take place. So some quick results. Almost all of the data sets that we could find demonstrated use. So 729 out of 735. Some notable results. So there's adding shelves and ledges showed an increase. So that's probably one of the only examples consistently that showed an increase in the rate of movement. Canopy bridges could increase movement, and there was strong evidence that underpasses were effective for ungulates. And I think this is perhaps the most important sort of take-home message is, if we have conditions of approval on a project that says you must restore the movement, or you must maintain movement, or you must prevent a decline in movement, and the majority of studies are unable to show that, or most of them show some loss of movement, then we haven't actually met the condition of approval for the road. So we need better studies. Our evidence to demonstrate that we're effectively mitigating barrier effects is quite weak. And that's probably because most of the studies weren't actually intended to measure that in the first place. So we get given, there's a request for quote from a road agency that says monitor these particular crossing structures. So we do that, but ideally we'd be getting in early and doing these proper sort of studies, or more scientifically robust. The agencies are keen to understand the effectiveness, but most of our studies are falling short, and we need benchmarks, multiple comparisons, and consider unintentional but inherent biases. And that is all. Happy to take questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Rodney. One quick question, if you are curious.
Rod, I have a question for you. Thank you for your presentation first. And I would have to ask you the problem of the control site, choose of a control site, because you consider, if you have a new upgrade away, you must consider another place, and in your place you must consider many things, including non-dedicated passages, and you must measure it, and it's never done. And the control site is the same. You have some passage that you have not thought about. So how do you manage it?
So we were not very We were happy if they had any control site, we were happy. We did not try and interrogate whether their control site was appropriate for the study. If they had a control, we just accepted their results. But you're exactly right. Trying to identify the right control site for a study is really difficult, and it leads to different outcomes or different. You can learn different things depending on the type of control. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And our next speaker is Mr. Song from the Institute Ecology from Korea. And we are looking forward to see how the mitigation measures is functioning in the roadkill hotspots.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Song from South Korea, and I'm working at the National Institute of Ecology under the Ministry of Environment. I'm in charge of research on roadkill mitigation measures and the improvement of wildlife corridor. The topic of my presentation is the effectiveness of mitigation measures at roadkill hotspot in South Korea. This presentation is based on a paper published last year and the current roadkill mitigation measures in South Korea. Since there may be some confusion regarding the roadkill data by year, I will provide a detailed explanation in the slide. The loss of biodiversity and human damage caused by roadkill is also a problem in South Korea, and various media outlets are raising the issue of roadkill, and it has garnered significant attention in the National Assembly as well. Due to rapid economic growth and development pressure, the length of roads continue to increase. Over the past 5 years, more than 1,000 kilometers of roads have been constructed annually on average. In 2023, the total length of roads reached 150,000 kilometers, with more than 1 kilometer of road constructed per square kilometer of land. The length of road in 2010 nearly doubled compared to that in 2019. However, the road management agencies differ by road type and region, leading to varying methods of roadkill data collection and recording keeping with the data scattered across the different sources. This poses a significant challenge in analyzing roadkill hotspots and developing effective mitigation measures. To address this issue, the IENE suggested roadkill mitigation plans to the Ministry of Environment in 2016. In response, the Ministry of Environment and the Ministry of Land Transport implemented the guideline of roadkill surveys and management in 2018. The main focus of these guidelines was to establish a unified system for collecting roadkill data across South Korea. The guidelines specify the method, duration, and species for roadkill investigations, as well as the roles of different road management agencies. The process of collecting roadkill data and evaluating the effectiveness of mitigation measures is divided into 5 steps. The first step is to collect standardized data using the Korea roadkill observation system. The second step involves analyzing the collected data to identify roadkill hotspots. The third step is conducting field survey of these hotspots to determine the appropriate mitigation measures. The first step is for road management agencies to install the mitigation facilities. Finally, the effectiveness is evaluated by comparing roadkill data before and after the installation of mitigation measure. The KROS is composed of a mobile application and a website. load vendors send data, including photos and location, through the good node application before removing roadkill carcass. The animal species and location data collected through the KORS are reviewed and approved. This is the logo of our application, and the apps consisted of a camera map, transmission history, and temporary storage. Load vendors can take photos of animals with the camera and check their current location and then send the data. This is the website where data is collected. Species identification from photo is carried out by the NIE and wildlife experts, who then approve the data after confirming the exact location on the road. The data collected by KOS over the past 5 years shows that road type are divided into 4 main categories. Expressway are managed by the Korea Express Corporation, National Highway by the Ministry of Land and Transport, and the provincial and local road by local governments. Since 2019, the volume of roadkill data collection has been steadily increasing. The increase in the amount of data collected rather than an actual rise in roadkill instance will be explained in the next slide. We are working to enhance awareness of the KORS by training road management agencies. This table is a list of the wild animals with the most roadkill data collected by KORS. The water deer amounts for 29% of the data and more than 70% when limited to wild animals. As previously mentioned, the increase in data collection volume rather than a rise in a roadkill instance can be explained by the studies estimating that at least 60,000 water deer are involved in roadkill each year in South Korea. This result is based on research on roadkill of water deer and records from wildlife rescue centers, with an average of about 12,000 water deer records collected annually through like the KRS. It is estimated that approximately 200,000 mammal roadkill incidents occur in Korea. Additionally, if we include small mammals and rodents, which are less efficiently monitored, the number is likely even higher. Sorry. The water deer is classified as a vulnerable species on the IUCN Red List and is found in parts of China and Russia. But in South Korea, water deer are widespread throughout the country, and in some local governments, their high population density even leads to regulate hunting to control their numbers. And endangered species such as the leopard cat and the otter also showed high rates of roadkill. The effectiveness of a roadkill mitigation measure in this study was conducted using roadkill data from 2019. The analysis of hotspot was based on the approximately 15,000 roadkill incidents involving wild animal species, excluding the livestock, birds, amphibians, and reptiles. The effectiveness of roadkill mitigation measure in this study, the analysis of roadkill spot was performed using kernel density with the intervals classified into 10 grades. Among these grades, the top 50 hotspots were selected from grade 1 to 5. Hotspot identified for roadkill were assessed through field survey to propose appropriate mitigation measures based on the 2019 NI study criteria for roadkill hotspot characteristics. The average length of this hotspot is 1.3 kilometer with an average distance between hotspot of 22.38 kilometers. To analyze the reduction rate in roadkill, the number of roadkill incidents before and after the implementation of mitigation measures was compared using data from KRS. The final step in the previously described 5-step roadkill mitigation process is effectiveness of the mitigation measures. Through the implementation of roadkill mitigation measures, roadkill incidents in 50 hotspots were reduced from 1,192 to 237, representing an average reduction of 80.2%. The mitigation facilities installed include fences, warning signs, and enforcement camera. Fences were installed in both directions along the road as a standard practice, with fences set up in 36 out of the 50 hotspots. On average, 5.29 kilometers of fence was installed per hotspot, following the guidelines for design and management of wildlife crossing structure by Ministry of Environment. The fences installed in connection with the surrounding wildlife crossing structure and bridge and rockfall protection barrier. The warning sign were installed as a solar-powered LED signs to improve visibility for drivers at night. The installation followed the standard guideline for variable traffic safety signs by National Police Agency. The reduction rate for roadkill hotspot by grade showed the highest reduction in 14 hotspots of grade 2. Grade 1, 2, and 4 all exhibit reduction rate of over 80%, while grades 3 and 5 show lower reduction rate compared to the average. When multiple roadkill mitigation measures were installed simultaneously, the average reduction rate was 79.9%, while the installation of single measure alone achieved an average reduction rate of 80.4%. Both proving to be effective, the roadkill reduction rate for fences in this study was similar to results from other research, and warning sign demonstrate a high reduction rate. In 2022, the number of roadkill incidents increased by 75.5% compared to 2021, but increased by 65.2% compared to 2019. For the hotspot with a high increase in incidents among the 50 hotspot, a review and improvement of installed mitigation measures are needed. Additionally, evaluating and implementing facilities not yet applied in South Korea, such as geograding and AI-based animal detection warning sign is necessary. The data collected through the KRS is suitable for establishing roadkill mitigation measures, but it is important to ensure that no roadkill data is omitted. Additionally, roadkill policy in South Korea should be focused on medium to large-sized mammals. There is need to apply new roadkill mitigation facilities to advance toward more precise and effective measures. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Song, for your presentation. And now we have time for 2 quick questions. It seems that nobody will ask you. So Our next speaker will be Mr. Romportl from the Charles University, and we are looking to presentation about the mitigation measures in the Czech Republic, here in Czech Republic.
Can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay, I'm Dušan Romportl from the Faculty of Science of Charles University, as Martin already mentioned. And I was asked by my colleague Mira Kutal to give this presentation instead of him. So that's the first apologize that I'm really not the right one for giving such presentation. So I would like to do my best. Second thing, what I should mention is that actually, when we prepare the abstract, we have some expectation, and this expectation really didn't met the final steps of data analysis. That these were somehow tricky to assess. So the presentation will be not really about the effectiveness of transport mitigation measures, but about the tools, about the overlap of data, which or tools of nature protection or connectivity protection, how this fit or not with analyzed GPS telemetry data from our large carnivores. I would start with the general introduction about the background or the situation in Europe. As probably most of you know, that the recovery of large carnivores, especially its expansion of wolves in Central Europe, and but also recovery of wolves and also bears and stabilization of lynx population, together with further development of infrastructure, road network development leads to habitat which is leading to habitat fragmentation. Together leads to more and more often conflict of this spreading and movement, dispersal or migration of large carnivores in case of human dominated landscape, as we have in not just in Central Europe but also in other some other parts, together with large home ranges, expanding territories, and the development of human impact in landscape. This provide quite clear conflict. The situation in the Czech Republic is I think like crystal clear that again we call Czech Republic as kind of crossroads of expanding wolf population. There are nice papers together with our colleague Pavel Hulva, showing based on also landscape genetic data the movement or expansion of particular populations from north, south, and the mixture in the Czech Republic is quite significant. So as the Czech Republic also as a transport let's say country in the middle of Europe, and needs to provide new highways, reconstructing new roads. It leads again to the same conflict as we can see in other parts of Europe. However, compared to, let's say, Scandinavia, some other parts like Germany or Poland, there was quite a lack of telemetry data on these large carnivores, because these are spreading from some neighboring countries, and just few animals or individuals were collared within the Czech Republic. So we start with we start with collection of these data of these collared animals, especially wolves, but also we include one bear and lynx, female or male, I hope. And then we wanted to ask or ask to answer this research question: how this heavily fragmented landscape and this continuing process of landscape fragmentation affect actually the dispersal possibilities of these large carnivores. What's the role of protected landscape areas, national parks, and especially Natura 2000 network? We call it network, but we know that in case of Czech Republic, it's not really network, it's rather patchwork. How the next question was how these known or described dispersal routes will fit into a specific network of wildlife corridors, which were designed together with again with our colleagues to protect this kind of habitat connectivity, population connectivity. And then we also had some other question, but I'm not able to ask within this presentation on this. So we collect all these data, actually more of them, but just these individual five or 9 wolves, 1 bear and 1 lynx provide some kind of really dispersal or even migration. But then, as you can see, we were at some analysis of some movements were quite tricky, that these like the frequency or quality of GPS fixes were not really somehow easy to analyze the exact route, the exact track of such animals. So in case of some animals, let's say colored here or telemetry here, were quite nicely or easily to be analyzed according to habitat use and usage of different mitigation measures. But in case of some large scale or let's say longer distances, it was more difficult. When we actually start with analysis of habitat use let's say habitat use, we have easily found that the dominant role of forests is nothing surprising for us, especially in case of their resting site or the core of the movement. But on their journeys, we record quite a high amount of the portion of the tracks were going through agricultural landscape, and not just pastures or meadows or some kind of mixture of these habitats, but also poor arable land. And most of you probably know how really we called it somehow like brown desert, that these big plots of arable land are significant for the Czech Republic. Also analysis of NDVI or other vegetation, and this shows the importance of forest, but also in the case of some dispersal, you can see significant a significant portion or ratio of arable land in case of this dispersal route. What's more probably more interesting is the analysis in terms of different kind of barriers and fragmentation geometry, as we call it. Here you can see the basic network of our highways and system of settlement, and those points are different kind of mitigation measures. The green are on green bridges, and there are some more of them. Actually, this is not really actual map, but yeah, we haven't able to get the new one. And as you can see, in case of some dispersal routes, those species or these individuals or animals use the exact actually underpasses. We have no data on crossing like green bridges or overpasses, but in some cases, especially the older part of highway system in the Czech Republic, as you can see here and here, are not really easy to cross. So in case of Gagat, he was just trying probably to cross this highway here and this highway here, but he was unable to make it. So he had to get back in this. So that's the first kind of result, that old highways need some kind of defragmentation measures which should be held. In the view of the overall overall or general landscape fragmentation. You can see some use common part of our national parks or protected landscape areas, unfragmented landscape. And in case of an analysis of these dispersal routes, these play a really significant role as core areas or stepping stones. There is nice overlay with the system of territorial protection, not just as I mentioned, national parks and protected landscape areas, but also Europe Natura 2000 sites, as you can see, for example, here, or also there's overlap with the national system as well. So these areas play a really important role, but just as a key areas, core areas or stepping stones. Let's say several decades ago, the Czech Republic also designed so-called territorial system of ecological stability, which is really called as a network. And we can see that there is some kind of positive roles of so-called biocenters, which are these blue colored areas. But in case of biocorridors, which are important part of this network, it really doesn't work. We found just poor match of the reconstructed tracks or migration routes of these 9 wolves and 2 other pieces, but there were just as I said, poor overlap with this. We also compared we made it a few years ago, the general habitat connectivity model for large carnivores. And it's not really surprising that for large carnivores are such wolves and or there in this case or lynx, there were quite nice overlap, especially in areas where we called it again some kind of crossroads. Especially this region is really interesting for further analysis of landscape permeability or habitat connectivity. But then this was quite one of the key input for the further developed ecological network for large carnivores. We called it biotop in Czech Republic for large carnivores, but we found that there was just less than 40% of overlap of the dispersal routes reconstructed here with this species specific network. So we don't know if it's enough or it's less. If in some cases there is quite nice overlap, but in some, as you can see here or here, but in some cases you can find just some poor overlap or not really significant usage of these corridors or actually of these networks. But again, designing of the core areas of this network was really it fit actually for requirements of these large carnivores. So to conclude or to wrap it up, this really simple overlap analysis, as I mentioned, especially the main barriers as old highways really needs to I don't know, overgo some new within the reconstructions, some new mitigation measures to promote better permeability. I think that we need some kind of defragmentation program, especially for these as I mentioned, old highways. In case of the role of national protected areas and Natura 2000 sites, they play a really key role as a core areas or stepping stones for migration or for the dispersing animals, but there is just poor benefit as for the protection of habitat connectivity or protection of the movement, because that's just the cost of the design of our Natura 2000. It's not network; it's rather patchwork, as I already mentioned. And the last question: how these known or analyzed dispersal routes of just few animals fit to the dispersal models or the specific species-specific wildlife corridors. There is nice fitting with the connectivity models. It's not surprising. However, just we can call it somehow just average overlap with designed ecological network for large carnivores, and we need more data, especially from the so-called critical parts of these corridors, how these are used or not, especially with large carnivores. So that's all. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Dusan, for your analysis. I would like to see more about the biotop. We can discuss further. And please, dear participants, do you have some questions?
A small question. Could you analyze with your data GPS at the scale of one road? Are the data GPS permit to analyze at the local scale of one road? Could we? Well, yes.
Yeah, these data actually really don't allow such detailed analysis that we expect when we started to collect this telemetry data. That will be really great source for such analysis, even in detail scale. But then I was quite surprised that some of those like the fixed points were collected in some cases just once a day, sometimes 3 times a day. And sometimes it was really gappy that you can find some really nice, actually track almost each hour or so the fixed point from the telemetry data or from color. But in cases there were some gaps lasting for several days. So that was really difficult, especially in this case. We expect that it will be great to analyze where these animals cross these highways or other barriers, but it was actually impossible. We need to, or we would like to discuss it in say future project, the integration of more data from camera traps, but also using the landscape genetics data. So that would provide us with more detailed insights in the movement, and then we can answer your question.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Do anyone another question? If not, I would like to invite our next speaker, who is Mr. Reck from the monitoring group from Germany. And he's going to speak about monitoring of effectiveness for invertebrates and small mammals such as mice and shrews. For online participants.
But I would like to sit down and use the computer by myself, and then we will try to come to the beginning. So as we looked for flightless insects some year ago in rather large underpasses, we found no or just a little use, and then we convinced our federal agency for nature conservation to start an exploratory surveys of whether and when underpasses are really useful for the small fauna. And we could combine this survey with some monitoring projects from the road administrations. Important are always, just looking for the cursor, yeah, it's coming, are always for ecological studies or solutions, the frame conditions. We cannot repeat such often enough. So our study is under the conditions of moderate rather north climate. That means underpasses are often cold and have shady entrances. That's a different, let's say, to the Mediterranean underpasses. And of course, we have an extreme nationwide insect decline and decline of other species. Wrong glasses. Don't ever get older than 60 years or so. Here it is. So our main measure for underpass aberration was the ratio of passage activity in comparison with reference activities. And we did also we looked at some behavioral characteristics. We looked for different ecological guilds, which are represented by different taxa. So we looked at for ground beetles with pitfall traps at 16 underpasses and some more with slightly different methods. We did some mark and captured underpasses. We looked for grasshoppers using also these pitfall traps, which was useful in the underpasses. We used malaise traps that were useful, and mostly we counted the grasshoppers directly on transects or all the area. We did also some mark recapture, similar to butterflies, direct counts and behavior observation inside and the entrance areas of the underpasses. We looked for dragonflies, ground-living rodents and shrews. For that we used baited camera traps, and for reptiles we used artificial hideouts. We didn't look for amphibia. That was because after decades of building amphibia tunnels and billions for amphibian tunnels, we expected lots of data. There are no. At least if you are looking for underpasses that are longer than 25 meters. There is no evidence, no quantitative evidence that such underpasses are used. And so we called colleagues in Switzerland and otherwhere. And the expert opinion is a strong recommendation to create and optimize spawning and terrestrial spawning grounds and terrestrial habitats on both sides of the lane, and maybe build up one or two multi-use underpasses, so from red deer up down to the grasshopper, if possible. And only otherwise, if such isn't impossible, you have, even for amphibians, you need tunnels more than 8 meters in width. The tunnel is 30 meters length, long, and nearly 2 meters in height. It can differ, again, the frame conditions. If you have perfect entrance areas, you can use smaller underpasses. So if you look at standards, we have to say many standards are questionable, and some given standards are really, they are wrong, not only probably wrong, they are really wrong. And you can, if you like, you can look up the results of these literature review and expert opinion. In a month or so, it will be published. So for all the others, we started looking for underpasses with different dimensions and the high probability that there are enough individuals for measures in the access area. The result was not so good. Very few underpasses had entrance areas where more than a few individuals could be expected. So our first lesson learned was most important and most cost effective would be to create high quality habitats for the target species in the access and in the entrance areas, or to create feeding habitat corridors. For the small fauna, the habitat topology in the close surrounding and in the wider surrounding is the most important thing. So if you just build up an underpass, let's say to safeguard metapopulations also, it hasn't any use. You have to, it's mandatory to create high quality entrance habitat corridors. So it's different from red deer or wolfers. The small fauna depends on the length of mirror fronts of the respective habitats and on the distance between the habitats or on continuous habitat corridors. So again, to our methods, it's what I said, we measured activity in the underpasses and in reference areas. This is already some kind of result. The camera traps for the small fauna, and you see nearly no activity in the underpass, even if it's a wide underpass, high activity around. We observed most of these passages in some periods within 1 year. Some of the passages we looked at 3 years, and one passage could be redesigned with the idea we have. And for instance, afterwards, we had many mice and many shrews inside this passage. So for mice and shrews, the dimension is not that important. It's quite different for butterflies. It's important how to, let's say, use places where the species can hide. For ground beetles, so you see always in this slide the variability of the dimensions. We looked for these species. For the ground beetles, we had even an underpass 150 meter or some meters more to look at. So and we could look, are there woodland species inside this underpass, or are there openland species, or even heathland species? It's a Natura 2000 site and should be connected. Of course, we found none. It's not that ground beetles cannot live there. We found cave inhabiting ground beetles, but that's not the target species in this area. So a typical result, to details, is shown here. We have high densities or higher densities of individuals and higher numbers of individuals. If we go to short underpasses, even if they are narrow, we find enough species and species activity. If we go to some longer underpasses in this row, just a few species are left. So we need, for woodland species, donor habitats nearer than 50 meters to the underpass. For xerophilic species, openland species, have donor habitats nearer than 30 meters, and quite a high openness index. Openness index is width times height divided by length. It's not a good measure. It's a really bad measure because some of the species react to height, other species react to width, and the interactions between these parameters are not linear, but it's a relatively simple measure. For the grasshoppers, we had similar results than for the openland ground beetles. So we need for the openland species at least a minimum height of 5 meters and an openness index of about 3 close by donor habitats. And you can see the effects maybe looking at this picture. This is the grasshopper distribution, each color different species on an overpass, and the result on our wide underpass, even the entrance areas are avoided. After redesign, we had some species, and especially night species at least, in the underpass. We did also mark recapture, but the results were all the same. Looking for butterflies, you see again, if the openness index is small, we have no transit flies in this underpass. If we have transit flies, at the first hand, we find migratory butterflies, but not none of the burnets, for instance. And we need even nearer donor habitats to such underpasses. and then minimum height of 5 meters and openness index more than 5. We cannot exactly tell what a light slit or what the effect of a light slit are. We hadn't enough repetitions. We think for lizards, for open land ground beetles, for grasshoppers, it's positive, but it's negative for the butterflies. They fly to the light slit, go upwards and end on the motorway. That's not fine. And we have also, don't look only at the small fauna, but only also on deer. We had quite interesting reactions of roe deer. We cannot interpret that at the moment in the right way, but they seem to fear the light slits. No, they fear the light slits. That can be tell, but we don't know what's on the behavior in the surrounding. Looking for dragonflies, the same is, there are shade-tolerant species, but there are many heliophilic species, and they also use only large, wide underpasses. We have no data. I think, I hope I do that. No data for reptiles. We had 2 less observations. We find regularly grass snakes or European adder, even in small underpasses, but no lizards. And we again asked expert colleagues, and for Central Europe, they had no proof that lizards go under, let's say, narrow underpasses. There are solutions, as from Richard Struik also, but these are wide and very short underpasses. This is Herpetroduct in the Netherlands. And we think that the lizards are, let's say, have the most demand on the openness index. There are still species group missing, the ground-living rodents. So the longer such an underpass is, the lower is the activity, but it's not a true result. We put in high densities of hideouts and low density, no hideouts, and we found in the end that mouse or shrew activity depends on the density of hideouts. So we just need very small underpasses for this species group. But if we learn so far, the report will available next year. Most important for the small fauna is the design of the access and of the entrance area. We also learned that some gills of the small fauna need as large or even larger underpasses than red deer. So in this row, the passage goals are quite different, of course, for red deer or for wolf, the passages for tribal range as well as for migration range. For the small fauna, mostly only for dispersal keeping metapopulations. At life, some species like European adder has also dispersal, has also migration to and back, and others too. The need for such passages is extreme, of course, for flightless species. Only in special cases we need such for species that are able to fly, but there are such cases, and we need often a supplement. For instance, for the small fauna, it's possible a very narrow green bridge or green strip of grassland at the traffic overpass that will function as supplement. And as I told you, we need, I would say, nearly always such a second spawning area on the other side of such a road. We learned, secondly, each guild, each species show different behavior or different mobility behavior. That's a pity. And in detail, the different gills of the small fauna or the large mammals need different differentiation measures. So the gills must site-specifically be represented in the impact analysis and in the mitigation measures. But there are good news. A good planner has no real difficulty to combine all the necessary requirements. And more good news for the large mammal specialists, if we have fauna passages that are frequently used by deer or by wild boar, we can use these species as mobile corridors for the small fauna and for plants too. So that's it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Heinrich, for very interesting presentation. Lots of information about, especially about the insects and the small shrews. Yeah. It seems that it depends on the habitat, also close to the entrance. And would you like to pose a question to the Heinrich, please?
Hello. As you mentioned for your example with the roe deer that was frightened, let's say, by the light, shouldn't we maybe rather look at individuals and the behavior of individuals, or what they, or even think how we want the animals to behave in the underpass or overpass and how they perceive it, rather than, let's plainly say, just improve the habitat for them? Because maybe even less, let's say, adequate underpass might even be more suitable in some cases.
So we were just astonished. So light slits have not the effect that roe deer is not using such an underpass any longer. We have, I think, 25 underpasses also in a survey for large animals. And if we have such a light slit, for instance, that's the underpass, and maybe you have a little creek inside there. Most important is these side areas for migrating. But if you have such a light slit, where's my underpass? That's the light slit. Deer and as well roe deer and red deer, if they come here, we don't know why they go into the water, walk along in the water and go back on this passage. And I have no explanations. You are maybe the experts, but they do it, and they do it in so many underpasses that it could be just one artificial effect also. We don't know when it comes that such repellent. I don't think it's a repellent, but it has an extreme effect on the species. I don't know what for.
Anyone else? Eric, please.
Just to confirm your opinion about light, and dragonflies are well known to not cross stream passages because it's dark and it stops them. So it could have reverse effect. And even if you put light underneath in the passage, it doesn't work. So you can the only solution is overpasses for dragonfly.
Anybody else who would like to ask? Thank you, Heinrich. So now let me introduce our last speaker of this session. It will be Mr. Puchel from France, and he will be talking about mitigation measures about Highway A79 in France.
Okay, thank you. Добрий день. I am Hippolyte Pouchel from Aegis. I'm an ecologic expert in this engineering consultancy in project management. And I share with you the question how to maintain and reinforce the ecological transparency in a widening or conversion of a road infrastructure. And more than that, how to know if it works. So we are in France. Okay. The most beautiful place in the world. I'm chauvinistic. So, and more precisely, we are in the middle of the France and in the part of the country characterized by extensive cattle farming and a wild river called Allier. So here it is. So the old road cross through bocage system and with oak woodland, very diverse in sizes, as we can see here. And thanks to this high degree of naturalness, there's a lot of species like European wildcat and Western barbastel in the woodland, like kingfisher and otter in the ponds, and like redback shriek in the open land and the bocage area. A large number of mitigation measures have been taken for this project, including thorough construction monitoring and exceptional species relocation measures. But given to the limited time presentation, I will detail three measures for you. The first is the restoration of the Allier River. Involves the removal of 250 meters embankment, place here, and more than 1 kilometer of riprap. So after, there's a construction of the new viaduct that span the entire floodplain of the Allier River. You can see. So for the first year, a simple visual monitoring allowed to notice that the first flood remobilized all the materials and a very vast area was flooded. You can see here, it's the same place just after the work and after the first flood. Any materials we are putting in this area were remobilized. The second monitoring considered the global ecological transparency that represents one wildlife corridor per kilometer. This was achieved by installing 19 new wildlife crossings and modifying 35 existing infrastructure. The monitoring carried out by Allier Hunter Federation used camera trap on 29 wildlife passages and it has shown the ecological function for 19 different species like wildcat, weasel, or hedgehog. We also have worked on water courses, would have been answered throughout ecological engineering operation. And the first year, we had the European brook lamprey observed spawning in a modified stream. So it's an exceptional observation because these species had not been recorded in the region for a decade. So I keep for the end of my presentation a very interesting subject for chiropterologists, because I am. Through an eco-design approach, this particular phonetic group had been taken in account by some recommendation, some improvement in upper passages with a guide barrier, in lower passages with a screening panel on the top of the structure, and the installation of a guide portal or bad gantries or bad gates. So these bad gates were strategically aligned with existing ecological guide structure identified in a baseline environmental assessment. And we can see on the top picture that the end of the gantries are very close to the edge. Here. On the image below, you can note the detail of the headlights and ultrasonic reflective coating with part of wood. So here is the light, and here is the part of wood, because the metallic parts being too smooth for good ultrasound reflectivity. So on this gate, we have two types of monitoring. The first carried by Ecosphere, used bat recorder and infrared camera. So this first wave of monitoring, conducted in June 2024, already shows targeted use of the bat bridge by bats with trajectory closely following the guide above the traffic and so above the truck. You can see here some trajectory. You have some video. The second way to monitor this bat gantry is the using of 3D trajectography. It's carried out by sea bison and blue lingua, and it uses an antenna with 4 microphones. And this technique was previously present at the IENE in Lyon, if you remember, for those who are here. And this technique is developed by Siberio and Aegis. So we use a tetrahedral antenna with 5-meter edges, and the survey enabled the establishment of 100 trajectories at the level of the gantry. With this technique, we have the eye of passages, and we can see here one one example of the trajectory of Kutal. So we don't have the bad gantry on the photo, but it's right here. It is the same for common noctule. You have each point. It's when the bats emit some sound. So we can see it is relatively straight on the gantry. So for the conclusion, the monitoring has demonstrated that wildlife passages are functional, and they were, I put necessary, but we can say essential for the local fauna. In particular, the release of the alluvial space of the Allier is really significant measures, and its long-term impact on the overall functioning of the ecosystem will be closely monitored with great interest. So we wait for the result of this particular monitoring. This project highlights the need to integrate such ecological infrastructure already at the planning phase. But more than that, I note that it's important to allow a very diverse panel of solutions, from the most bigger and complex, like wildlife crossing, special aqueducts, but to the simple and the little one, because they are very complementary. There's a lot of complementary. So thank you for your attention. Et merci beaucoup et bon appétit. You have some question.
Thank you, Mr. Bushell. Do you have some questions? Yes, please.
Thank you for your presentation. I have a brief question. Have you observed any Myotis or Plegotis species using the bed gantry?
It's a very good question. And we have mostly we have Pipistrelle on these bad gantries, but there's some trajectory of Myotis and Barbastel, which is very interesting. And we have horseshoe bat either on this, but the problem with this species is the power of the sound they emit, and we can't have largest trajectory like we have on Pipistrelle, or more for noctule, for example.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. It's also about these bed gates. What behavior did you find 100 meters away from these bed gates? The background of my question is, we looked for beds in underpasses and overpasses, and we found high densities of beds crossing at bed structures. We looked 100 meters away, 500 meters away. We found low densities crossings, but much more individuals in a length of, let's say, 1 kilometer of woodland than ever crosses on our structures.
See, it may be a lack in the studies. We don't go longer from the infrastructure, so the trajectories permit to have 20 meters space of study, maybe more, maybe 100, but we don't search further than. Cherche pas loin en fait. So I can tell you.
Thank you for your presentation. on the slide of the gantry, you can see a rope with polystyrene pole, just close to the gantry.
Yes.
What is that exactly for? Or does it have a real meaning for the trajectory?
Yes, it had a real meaning, yeah.
Well, on the background of my question is also that elsewhere in France, this type of rope balls has been tested on all the bridges, and it has no use for chiropteros, and this is a structure, the overall structure that has the main use.
Yes, this headlight, we call this acoustic headlight. They are made of polystyrene balls with some form in it to reinforce the reflectivity of the entire structure. This ball is tested in Choiseul in France during the works and the construction of a road, and it works effectively. So I don't know.
Okay. Well, sometimes on all the bridges, some studies shows that bats actually follows optical guides or the overall structure, but not the rope that is set up in the middle of the bridge. So maybe it can be controversial.
It's to reinforce. It's a headlight to reinforce the structure, because we know that the metal don't be enough reflective as woods or this ball. So we complete the construction with this type of balls.
But if just a second, just because a rope has to be maintained, changed, or whatever. In the overall structures,
it's a cable.
Or it's a cable.
Yes, it's a cable with yes, because if effectively in Choiseul we used a rope, a real rope, and it's stand on the construction maybe 2 years, and today it's the 10 year of use, and it's still here, and it resists. So that's what we decide on this other. We are not on the circulation, on the traffic, on the Choiseul. So we let on this type of construction, we are just on the traffic. So we are obliged to put some cable. Thank you.
Thank you. There is another question from Marcus.
Thank you. Very interesting presentation. I believe that the impact from these bat gates depends on which bat species you're focusing on. I think, there are bat species that are avoiding open areas due to risks of predation and so forth. And I believe those bat species will not be impacted on these type of bat gates. I believe they would more favor going underneath the road, small culverts and so forth. So, so in many cases, we cannot build something that will fit for all species. And I think that's also the case with bats.
Yeah, I'm agree with this, and we can return on this. I have the time on this image. We search of the best global transparency. So we have these gantries. We put in where we have woodland. An interesting woodland, but all over the 88 kilometers of this infrastructure, we have a work on each passage, lower passages and upper passages, take account of all the species and this specificity that you ask. We take account and for example for the horseshoe bat, we know that the gantry are not so efficient, so we improve all the passages.
For sure, it will depend on the ecology of each species. Yeah. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I was wrong, and this is not the last speaker. And I would like to invite Mr. Hlacvajo from the Institute of Functional Ecology, University of KwaZulu-Natal from South Africa. So this is our last speaker. Finally, thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm gonna give a talk on the PhD work that I'm doing in South Africa. So our road ecology perspective is still on a baby stages. So if we are doing a lot of monitoring. It's only now that we are trying to shift from monitoring to trialing some mitigation measures. And this is what I'm gonna share with you today. So we are exploring wildlife crossing effectiveness on the track and 4 highway. So this is a economic highway that's connect about 3 provinces in South Africa. So you can just imagine the traffic intensity on this highway. So it's out of protected areas, but then we're trying to understand if animals are indeed using these structures. So to just give a background, I'm sure we are all agreeing to say that transport infrastructure play a very important role in connecting societies. I mean, for us to access areas of economic zones, our working areas, we need the presence of roads. But again, we must also accept the fact that they does exactly the opposite for the natural landscapes. They cross natural landscape, which improves or increase fragmentation of ecosystem and areas that are critical for biodiversity. And by so doing, they reduce ecological connectivity and further accelerate the losses of biodiversity, particularly for terrestrial ecosystems. So in this map, I'm trying to highlight the fragmentation impact of roads in South Africa. So to this end, we are already having extensive networks of roads, particularly as you can see on that map. And I must say approximately 750 kilometers of these roads, they crisscross or intersect the landscape in our country. But then it's surprising, we don't have even a single mitigation structure or wildlife crossings. And a number of these roads, they passes through areas that are home to threatened species, that are wetland, comprised wetland ecosystem as well as protected areas. But then what is it that is being done? Okay, see. So our population in Africa, I would say that at this current time, our population is currently approximately 1.5 billion human population. But then projections are saying that by 2050, this number is mostly likely to double. But then what does that say for linear infrastructure? So it means that we are going to see a lot or more and more of road transport or rail transport being made to accommodate the growing population. And as that's the case, it means that more of our landscape is still going to be invaded. And that's going to increase fragmentation of habitats, which leads to the loss of habitats. And also we know that when roads are being built, the barrier effects that is formed, it means now animals have now to either avoid using the roads, which means that they are neglected or they are excluded from accessing important ecological resources that they need. But then when they attempt crossing the roads, that's where we are going to see massive of roadkills, which leads to a total loss in biodiversity. So that also talks about the behavioral change that animals are forced to apply just because of the presence of this infrastructure, which altogether increases the risk of extinction. So coming to the objectives, global research has emphasized the importance or need for incorporating wildlife crossing structures in road network designs to facilitate connectivity. And we know the benefits that are associated by having these structures. But it is totally different in our country. Oh, you don't know what's happening? Okay. Okay, I think I was here. Yes, so we are still behind in South Africa, or could I say in Africa. So the only alternative that we have to give awareness about the impacts of this infrastructure on wildlife is to monitor structures that are already existing. We have roads that were built back then, but without the consideration of animals or wildlife per se. But these roads, they do have structures, as you can see, the structures that I've just put here. So this study decided to alternatively explore animal use of existing under road drainage culverts by wildlife. So they are existing, they were made for stormwater drainage mainly, but we are interested in finding out if animals are adapting to use this. Okay, we are using camera traps, as you can see there. And this is the road that we are monitoring. We are only monitoring section 3, which is up around this area. So our results, these are preliminary results. The study is ongoing. Found out a total of 1,143 observation of animals that have used the underpass crossing from December 2022 to April 2024 were made. And as you can see, the annual variation, 2023, we had the highest observations, followed by 2024 and lastly 2022. This is logical given that we monitored for 1 month in 2022 and all year in 2023, only 3 months in 2024. It's mostly likely that records for this year may bypass the previous year. So this is the seasonal variation or monthly variation. We can see that December and January had the highest observation of views. But then it's surprising that if you check there, July, we had a slight peak there. And July, this is the period where a majority of the farm owners, they apply banning to control their rangeland. And that's associated with some animal movement. That could explain why there's a slight peak there. Then a total of 19 species were observed to have used the monitored structures, and these included 3 taxonomical groups: mammals, amphibians, reptiles, as well as reptile, yes, and birds, I mean to say. And these are the mammal species that were observed. Majority of the animals are smaller mammals. Then we've got about 2 or 1 frog species and 3 bird species. Okay. Then we're also interested in understanding what type of use the animals are showing in the monitored underpasses. Majority of the animals have applied a complete confirmed crossing. This means that the animals was captured entering the structure and walked the entire leg until they were captured by the opposite camera on the other side. That's a complete crossing. Then the rest, there was a slight variation in the remaining use pattern. Complete unconfirmed was 78, and this is an instance where the animal is captured or is recorded entering the structure, but we don't have evidence of it exiting on the other side or either coming back. Maybe it moved fast before the camera could capture that. Then exploratory, the animals approaches the structure with an intention to cross either, but then it just assesses the surroundings, then decides to do a U-turn. So only about 52 records for that were recorded. Then partial use, the animals was captured entering the structure, or the immediately decide to do a U-turn, goes back in the same direction. So that's a partial use. Then interestingly, we also discovered that there's a core use of these structures between human and animals. So this means that the period where the structures were not available for animals because there were people underneath. So some they use it for resting, some they use it as shelter. We're also surprised for that. but then this is what we managed to get. And 77 of these were unidentifiable. We could not study the behavior. So, okay, I'm impressed about this kilometer marker, this kind of like a structure. It had the highest observation, as you can see there. And this is the section where we deployed mesh fencing to funnel animals. We wanted to see if having the fence would either improve or encourage animals to use. And to our findings, animals, they use this structure more frequently. So again, another interesting thing is structure 3.2, structures 27.2 and 45.6. You can see the difference is slightly the same there. And these comprise of the same substrate materials. It was a paved underpass. And to our contrary, we expected more animals to use 38.0 because it had a natural substrate, which was a combination of water body with some soils that are visible. So we thought animals gonna use that one because it's more natural to them. But it was opposite to that. They preferred structures that were paved. Then structures that had a water body were less preferred by terrestrial animals. They were mainly used by water-dwelling birds, as well as the Cape clawless otter, which is also water-dwelling, and the water mongoose as well. So in conclusion, we can say that our data show that indeed animals are utilizing this structure, although they were not initially designed for them. And again, animal use of these structures was influenced by the characteristics of the crossing structure. We are talking about the size, dimensions. So structures that were large were preferred by medium-sized mammals. I'm talking about the common duiker, the red duiker. A lot of antelopes, they used the structures that were larger a little bit, but then smaller mammals or smaller vertebrates, they preferred using the circular culverts, which are smaller in size. And again, I must say, yes, the substrate materials has also talked about this, as well as the habitat type close by. So the habitat that was more vegetated, more like dense, it was less preferred by animals. They preferred that habitat type that had some vegetation, but it was sparsely distributed so that they could have channels where they could move. And again, culverts that had a funnel fencing installed had recorded the highest use. So going forward, it means that we need to expand to try to see if we could apply a lot of fencing, but then that will depend if we get funding for that. But yes, this is what I have. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hotwire. And would someone who would like to ask some question before a lunch?
Thanks, Tavo. That was really good. I'm just wondering why you said some of the species just maybe just explored around and they didn't go. So I'm wondering which ones maybe you think went across and which ones didn't go. Like, do they need to go across or do they not?
Thanks, Lavinia. So from my observations of the camera trap images that we received, a lot of animals that applied exploratory behavior were those that are using the structure to prey or to find meal. So normally they'll be coming closer to the structure, just navigate the surrounding. If there's a rodent, there's a lizard that it can feed. From there, there's nothing, decides to go back. So I could say that that was some preying attempt.
Thank you, Tobo, for this very interesting presentation. My question is for the very last slide. And when you say that terrestrial animals avoid a culvert that have water inside, actually, is it that they do avoid any kind of culvert, or do they avoid culvert that only enable water to go through? Because if culvert have also soil, so is it, maybe it's much more a question of a ratio between spaces available for terrestrial species or species that goes into the water.
Thanks for the question. To answer that question, I will compare structure 50.0, which is entirely water. The structure has water. It does not have any terrestrial or terrain close by. With structure 38.0, So 38.0 has a water body this side, but again with a natural terrain where animals could pass. And if you compare these two structures, we had about eight observations that were made here, and all of these were species that are compatible with water. I'm talking about marsh mongoose, water mongoose, as well as the Cape Flawless otter and some ducks which are compatible in water. But then if you check kilometer 27.2, it had a combination of water and some terrain that was available for animals. And although not that, I saw, so it's not 20, it's 38.0. So although it is higher, you can see 94 observations were made, but it's lower than that one, which means animals are using it, but not as much as this one, which had a paved terrain. So we still have some reuse, but not at a rate that we would have anticipated.
So anyway, this was the last question, it seems. Thank you for coming to this session, and I hope some information will remain in your brains afterwards. And now enjoy the lunch, and next sessions will start 2 p.m.